Hello, welcome to Hearthstone Painting. My name's Mark. Today we're delving into the world of Age of Sigmar. Very rarely do I paint any models from this range, but these Helsmiths of Hashut really inspired me. And I thought it'd be cool to paint a War Despot, a character rather than a unit at this point. So I wanted to go with something a little bit different. So we're going to start with the skin. So, starting with a layer of Rakarth flesh, we're going to do 2 coats of this, watered down, and then when it's dry, we'll be able to wash it. So to keep it nice and dull, the skin, we don't want it to be too almost alive, we want it to feel quite stony. We're going to wash it with Agrax Earthshade. So Rakarth flesh is normally used for undead creatures, so we're not going to leave it really dark, but we're going to just add that Agrax Earthshade to dull it down, and then we're going to go back in with the Rakarth flesh, which has been watered down gently on the wet palette, and just pick out all the higher areas, only leaving the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. So work your way around. There's not a lot of flesh. We're working on this first because it's the lowest element of the model, and we can build up from it. We're going to do a quick mix because we don't want to go too bright on his skin. We're going to mix Rakarth flesh and flayed one flesh together. And we're going to then add that as a little bit of a highlight on top of all of this, just picking out higher areas, but leaving some of that Rakarth flesh in the recesses. And then finally, moving to just flayed one flesh on the real peaks of his face, on his cheekbones, top of his nose, eyebrows, etc. And every dwarf, or chaos dwarf, or Helsmith of Hashut in this case, worth his salt, has lips. They normally have their lips around their teeth, so we're going to mix 50-50 Lahmian Medium, Carroburg Crimson, the two together, and just apply that to the bottom lip in this case. While we're on the face, we're going to get in there and do the teeth as well. So starting with Steel Legion Drab, we're just going to paint those 2 hilariously oversized lower canines, and the teeth in the middle as well. So there's a kind of a line of his teeth in the center, and then the 2 main teeth as well. And again, we'll wash with Agrax Earthshade. And thankfully, because we've already washed the face with Agrax Earthshade, we don't need to go too intensively with this. It should just sit on the teeth nicely. And then we'll build up from Blade Brown first, working our way to the top. We're going to leave a little bit of the Steel Legion Drab at the bottom, and then we will follow that up with another segment of Karak Stone, again a little bit higher to the top. Just take your time with these lines, and then the flayed one flesh will just be on the very, very tips of those teeth. If you can paint some lines on it, great. If not, don't worry. I've also gone in and painted a few little dots of this in the middle of his teeth. Now, we're going to try and keep a very tealy, turquoisey effect on this model across the whole, or basically across most of it. So we're going to start with Abaddon Black, and we're going to paint that underskirt on this miniature, as well as the gun holster. And we're going to highlight them slightly differently. So Abaddon Black doesn't need washing, but we're going to mix Abaddon Black and Incubi Darkness here to get a really dark turquoisey colour, and then we're going to go in and just effectively overlay this on the black sections of his underskirt, leaving a real small line of the Abaddon Black in the recesses. We've watered this down quite nicely, so just take the time. If you want to do 2 coats of this, feel free. It will just kind of bring that black to a more, turquoisey feel. And on the holster and then a small package on his back, it's got like a little pouch. We want to use Corvus Black instead. We want this to be a bit more of a neutral black rather than turquoise black. So just paint the top section of the holster and the top element of his little package. I'm assuming there's some kind of demon bound in there or something. Now we're going to edge highlight both, starting with the dark blacky turquoise colour. We're going to do Incubi Darkness around the edge of the underskirt. Of course, aim your brush in a diagonal fashion to the line wherever you can. Sometimes you do have to paint front on, but if you can do that 45-degree angle around your edges, it should Be nice and simple to do. And then the Mechanica Standard Grey, we're going to be painting, of course, the highlights of the more sort of grey-black elements, which is the beard, which I forgot to mention earlier. So we're painting the beard in this colour, and as well as the pouch and holster on his back, just paint the edges of all of those. And then finally, a real gentle highlight for both of these elements. Firstly, the turquoisey black, we want to just go with Carroburg Green, just go right in those edges and do the extremes of the edge highlighting in the same fashion you've done already previously. And you just want to pick out the sort of most extreme elements of all of this. Try and do a thinner line if you can, but no dramas if you can't. And then on the sort of grey-black areas, we just want Dawnstone to do the same. You can paint some blades of paint across the beard, mainly on the front of his beard sections, and then of course on the holster and the package on his back. You just want to do tiny little edge highlights on those elements that you've already covered with the Mechanica Standard Grey. So sticking with our turquoisey ethereal theme, we are going to go with Iron Warriors for all of the armour now. Stick with me. We're going to make this look, tinge it with teal, and use the highlights to make it look metallic. So we're going to go in and we're going to paint, I think, 2 coats. Like, you want to water down the Iron Warriors. You don't want to use it on a wet palette. You want to use it on a standard, either a tile, or in this case I'm just using the kind of solid piece of the wet palette. And we're adding a little bit of water. You need to be careful not to add too much water because it genuinely separates the pigment, the metallic pigment, which is larger than normal paints. So gently keep adding water to this as you're going. You're going to take a little bit of time to paint this, but that's okay because it's worth it. And then we're going to hit it with some Coelia Greenshde. Coelia Greenshde, lovely name. Just 1 coat, and you want to run it all over the metal. Wherever you have painted the Iron Warriors, you want to hit this. That's his feet, that's a lot of his sort of body armor, his helmet, arm, gauntlets, hands, you name it. All of those pieces, let's just douse it in Coelia Greenshde. It's going to look a bit strange initially. It's going to feel it's very matte. You're going to lose a lot of that kind of brightness of the metal, but that's what we want. We want it to look kind of turquoisey underneath, and then we're going to bring it back with the highlights. So going around all of these elements, there's quite a lot of hard edges on this model, kind of the point of them. They look great like that. So we're going to get in with Iron Hand Steel, just go in and edge highlight everything and take your time. Of course, move your model, move your brush to make sure you can get that 45-degree angle in all cases. And where you can't, just try to line paint it gently. And then we're going to move to Stormhost Silver for the next highlight of this, which is the higher edges. We've basically edge highlighted everything in Iron Hand Steel. We're now just going to go in and just touch those extremes, and we'll try to just do maybe 50% of the edge highlights and leave a bit of that Iron Hand Steel visible underneath. So you're starting to see now that tealy panel is contrasting with the edge highlight of the steel. Hopefully, I think it looks pretty cool. And then finally, just because they are so pointy, this armor's so geometric, we're going to grab some white scar and some Stormhost Silver, mostly silver, because the white scar can overpower those metal pigments pieces quite extremely. So we're just going to get that and just do the real edges, just tiny little elements, especially on the shoulders, around the helmet, and on the lower elements that just sing on those, you know, apexes of the geometries. Now the skirt, or the chainmail skirt, we're going to just paint this with Iron Hand Steel. I thought about painting it in another colour, but I think it just needed to stay metal, but we've gone for the brighter metal. So in this case, we're not making it a turquoisey colour. We're just going to stick with the Iron Hand Steel to start. 2 coats of this again, water it down as you keep applying. You know, you're going to take some time to paint this, so just keep adding a bit of water as you go. Keep going and going and going, otherwise that metal will start to dry up as you paint. We'll douse this in Nuln Oil, make it look a little bit different to the other metal. Don't worry too much about getting it on the underskirt that you've already painted in the turquoise, or the dark turquoise black. It'll just sit into that recess nicely. We'll just go in with Iron Hand Steel, and we're kind of doing a highlight slash layering again, but we're only going to highlight the edges, and then we're going to effectively layer over one side of the chainmail links to make it look like the light shimmering across it. So one side leaving it washed, and then the other side we're going to paint it with Iron Hand Steel. And there is a lot of them, so a bit time consuming, but he is a hero character. And then we're going to pop in with the Stormhost Silver and just paint the edges, as we had done on the Iron Warriors element. Now, more metal, and we're getting them all out of the pots apparently. We're going for Leadbelcher. In this case, again, gently add that water in and keep adding it as you apply this, but we're only going to paint this to the sort of weapon head. Is this a halberd? Is this a spear? I'll let you decide. I'm sure it's got some awesome name. I don't know what it is, but it's a pretty cool weapon. So we're going to paint this with Leadbelcher to give us a different tone. Leadbelcher is slightly more, well, it's more like lead. If you've ever seen old pewter models, it pretty much matches that colour. So it's got that gentle warmness to it that maybe the other colours don't have. And then to get that demonic look, we're going to get Biel-Tan Green and wash this section. It'll look bonkers, but really do douse it. The more you can get on there, the better. And you also want to paint that sort of demonic, I guess it's the area that holds the demon in this as well, that swirl, and really douse it on, because it's going to add to the effect in a minute. And it's going away from the teal, but it stands out from the teal. We've gone fully saturated here to the green, away from that turquoisey colour that we're working on the main model. I just think this looks really cool. Washes on metals just look wicked. It dries very different to how it looks when you're painting it, so don't be too worried about dousing it, because it does end up sort of settling down. Now with the Leadbelcher, we're literally just going to paint one side of this fully, leaving a little bit of the Biel-Tan Green in the edges, but we're going to just go in, paint that Leadbelcher on one side, and we're going to edge highlight the other side, and then here on the back of it we're going to paint the same side effectively to how you're looking at the model, and then we're going to edge highlight the other side. This bit's in slow-mo. Don't know why, but it is. So once that's done, you'll get like one side that's still green, one side that's going to be almost a solid Leadbelcher with that recess of the green. And we're obviously going to paint over the demonic section. But then what we're going to do is go in with Stormhost Silver and just paint all of the edges, all around it, where we can. And then down the middle of the blade, it's probably the most difficult one. But you just want to make sure you line the brush up to that edge, because I don't think you can really comfortably do it with the side of the brush. I think you're going to have to use the end. So you just want to take your time and you work your way down that line. Make sure your arm and brush are in line with that peak. It should roll through. So we're sticking with the metals, and this is the only real colour that isn't on that side of the greens and turquoises. So Runelord Brass is just going to be done to paint all the trim. There's trim everywhere on this chap. There's trim all over his beard. There's trim on the base of him, there's trim on the back, there's trim on the guns. There is trim on the gun, we'll get to that in a minute. There's trim on the weapon, both at the bottom and the top. But leave the shaft, we're going to do the shaft separately. So just paint everything that you feel should be brass at this point. And Seraphin Sepia is the wash for Runelord Brass, but here you can see all the elements that were needed. There's a lot of it, but it suddenly, the model just like pops together. All of those metal elements that we've just worked on kind of suddenly merge together, which feels really lovely. So now we're going to go Seraphin Sepia over all of it and I'm very liberal with washes. Some people may feel they want to wash it a little bit less, but I feel the wash can do so much work for you, especially on metals. Maybe not on other colours, but especially on metals. And Seraphin Sepia and Runelord Brass are a match made in heaven, in my opinion. There may be alternatives from other brands, but these two colours are great. And then all you'll need to do is go in with Stormhost Silver. Those two washes, well, that wash and that base coat just are fantastic. So you'll be able to go in with Stormhost Silver and paint every single edge. And that's every little rim around every gem, every little dot on the weapon, just everything. But it's time consuming, but so worth it for these figureheads of your army. And we're sticking with the metal theme. Now this is quite a cool, fun little thing you can do. I realised on the box art, and I haven't stuck with the box art particularly closely. I like to try and do things differently. But we're going to paint Iron Hand Steel. Now there's a few little rings on the beards that I missed, so I'm painting those in Iron Hand Steel. And I'm also painting the weapon shaft, and on the box art it had like a blend from brass to silver. And you could wet blend that with metals. I think that's really messy. I think it's going to be really difficult to do because you have to be a little bit thicker than normal paints. So we're just going to paint it in Iron Hand Steel initially, and then we'll go back in and do the washes, and I'll show you a little trick that we can do to make that blend seamless. Difficult to paint around the hand, but just make sure your brush is in the right direction for that grip. So washing the rings real quick. Biel-Tan Green on those. Of course, you want to try and get it on the beard where possible. But then we'll go in with the Stormhost Silver. Quickly highlight those rings. Now the funky bit, which we were just talking about, we're going to mix Lahmian Medium, Seraphin Sepia 50-50, and we're going to use this in a few ways. Well, a couple of ways. We're just going to apply it to the Iron Hand Steel on the shaft of the weapon first, to give it an overall wash, and then we're going to start going from the bottom up and blending it in. So here's our first pass, painting the whole thing to give it that shading. And then once that's dry, which you need to wait for it to dry, don't try and do this again later or straight away. You don't need to go in and maybe just do it 2/3 of the way down. So leaving that first third where his hand is. And if you can, feather it up with the brush, but yeah, look, it is what it is. You know, this is going to look pretty good regardless. And then finally, again, waiting for that to dry, take some time, is just do the last third in another coat of this mix, and it should just build up nicely. You could add more and more of these layers, but I think you're going to want to add more Lahmian Medium. You might want a 75-25 mix if you want to do more of this transition, but it's just making it look like it's blending from silver down to a nice brass colour. So now we're going to actually get some turquoise out. After all this time, we haven't really used any, so we're going to grab Carroburg Green, and this is a layer paint, so it's thinner than any base paint, so we will need 2 thin coats. We're going to paint all of his cloak that's around his arms, and we're going to paint his sash around his middle, alongside a small little strap that kind of runs over the back of it. We're going to paint all of that in this Carroburg Green. Remember, 2 smooth coats wins the day. And when we are done with that and it's nice and dry, some Nuln Oil doused all over it. Not Coelia Greenshde, mainly because it's not a million miles away in tone. It's not going to give you much definition. You could maybe water this down a smidge either with Lahmian Medium or water, but I'm just going in with an Nuln Oil. And one, that's because it helps you see where the recesses are for when you're doing the layering. It does give you a real intense shift, but the model overall is quite intense. There's a lot of big gaps and big recessed areas. But we'll then go back in once the Nuln Oil is dry and repaint over Carroburg Green. Again, it's quite watered down. We're picking out the vast majority of this cloak and sash. So work your way around. Some of it's almost edge highlighting, some of it is just literally reblocking in. And on the sash, it's a lot of lines rolling around his body in a horizontal direction. But keep the Nuln Oil in the deep recesses wherever you can. And if you do paint over any of the recesses, see how it dries. It sometimes shows through that black anyway, because the paints are quite, once you've watered them down, translucent. So you can get away with little mistakes here and there. And then we're going to make a mix of Carroburg Green and Sybarite Green. We didn't want to go all the way to Gauss Blaster Green, which is the sort of tertiary of these three. We're just going to make a mix of the two, I guess the base and middle in this case, to make a kind of nice middle turquoise. I feel that Sybarite Green is quite bright. This feels like a lot like the old turquoise green from the past, which is maybe me showing my age. And with this, we're going to do quite a heavy highlight. And in some areas, we'll actually paint this in. That might be at the top of the sash and at the top of his arms, where we want it to look brighter. But everywhere else, we want to just edge highlight it. So work your way around. It's not as easy to angle your brush at that 45 to do edge highlights. There's areas you can, but most of the time with this, you're going to be painting the brush sort of 90 degrees on. So just work your way around and keep your hand and brush in line with where you want to go. And then finally, Sybarite Green of our tertiary here. Not as much of a step up because of that central one we've done, but with this one we just want to paint the edge highlights. And maybe some of the top sections. Work your way around. And you can also add some little cuts and scratches in here if you wish. I don't think I have on the final model, but if there's any way you think, oh, that'd be nice to have a little nick of fabric where maybe something's caught, you can do that here with a few little extra lines, just gentle little lines and scratches, whatever takes your fancy really. I'm going to take a few liberties with the gun. I didn't know what to paint this, so I kind of just defaulted to like a wooden back section, but realizing later on after doing the editing that maybe it should have been more a bone color, but I did what I did. So we're starting with dryad bark, 2 gentle layers, just water it down, add that on. Dryad bark's perfect for wood, as you would expect. But we've finally broken away from any turquoisey colours. I've taken a few liberties here. I'll show you the wood, but there's a lot of extra bits that need to be painted, and it's easier to do the metal elements after the base is done. But I'll just explain that in a moment. But firstly, we're hitting this with Nuln Oil, our favourite wash. Yeah, they're just perfect for each other. And then what we're going to do is, once that's dry, is with Gore4 Brown, we're going to edge highlight it a bit, but we're also just going to fakely paint some grains in there. So it's not just going to be the edges only. We're going to sort of do some swirls and some lines on it to make it look like it's made of wood, but maybe a really well designed, well polished, sanded, I've forgotten the word, but sanded piece of wood. You know, it's a well-made weapon rather than it being a rough piece of orc kit or something. And then once that's done, and we've got our lines in there. Apologies, it going off screen a little bit here. Still working out our setup. But once we've done that line, we're going to go in with the Baneblade Brown and just highlight the edges as well. A little bit less of an edge highlight as previous, and also just paint over some of them lines to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Now, I didn't want to get everything and have to redo everything on camera, but I've effectively gone in and painted a few of these elements in the Runelord Brass and a few of the elements in Ironhand Steel. I've washed the Ironhand Steel in the Biel-Tan Green, finished the Runelord Brass in the same way, and I've just gone in and highlighted those up with said colours. Stormhost Silver on the Runelord Brass, and then on the Iron Hand Steel, I've just highlighted it, Iron Hand Steel and Stormhost Silver. Apologies for the skip there, but we've previously covered them. Now we're going to go in and paint the internal of his cloak. So we're very nearly done. A few more steps. We're just going to go with Wraithbone. The box art had a lovely freehand on the edge of his cloak, but I thought it's quite intensive. Would love to do it, but I think this channel's more about army painting. Although this is a character and we're doing a lot more steps. So we've just painted the internals, leaving that turquoise that we've already painted on the rim. So we're kind of bracketing that white rather than it blending over in any way. But once that's done, you'll want 2 coats of Wraithbone. We want to just go in with Seraphin Sepia. Try and get the wash to sit in deepest recess. And it's quite hard because it's going to want to run out. But what you can do is once you've added the paint is turn the model upside down. And it should then just pull in the right area. So a little tip for any annoying things like that where it wants to roll out of the crevice is to turn it upside down and then it will just sit where you want it to sit. We're then going to go in with Wraithbone again once that's dry and just paint the vast majority of the internal of the cloaks, leaving that Seraphin Sepia in the deep recess, and then White Scar, which just edge highlight the very extreme of the cloak, almost lining up with the turquoise that we've already done. Now just make it seem like it's disappearing into darkness on his arm. So we're very nearly done. Now I want to try something a bit more bonkers on the horns, letting the wash do a lot of the work. And then, of course, our painting to really bring it out. So we're starting with Corax White on the horns, and Corax White is quite a thick, chalky colour. I'm sure there are better alternatives, but I'm sticking with the Games Workshop paints for simplicity for most of you guys. So Corax White is a thick base coat, and it's fantastic, but it needs a lot more watering down than most other paints. So there's always something to consider. So this was 2 coats, which was quite watered down, and that was basically perfect. We painted the horns. Now we're going to get Lahmian Medium, Coelia Greenshde, and 50/50 this. What we're going to do then is wash the Corax White horns, and we're going to be quite sensitive with how we add it on. We kind of want to roll it in, but we don't want to completely douse it. We don't want this dribbling everywhere. We want to just make it so it sits in between where we're going to highlight effectively. And you can kind of do this. I can't explain the process, but you want to almost load the brush up and almost place it in the area you want it to be. So unlike most of the washing we've done where we're just dousing the thing in black or green or whatever, we want to get it specifically in areas, and you can do that. It takes a bit of practice. It's almost like learning how surface tension works with water. But what we want to do is get it to almost run in the main sections of those horns. So each panel is a fade from white to green to white again, with a lovely gradient. At least that's the intention. I think this works pretty well. Now, you want to leave this to dry as much as you can, as long as you can. Wait till it is bone dry, because if you get any paint on this while it's drying, it's just going to ruin the whole effect. But you can see how it's sort of blending in from the top down. It's also blending in to the sides. But we're going to go back in with Corax White, which we've already got on the palette, watered down, and just paint the edges, all the edges. And it's going to bring them out from them gradients that we've created. You'll notice there's a few little horn nubs on the edges that you just want to also catch. But generally, roll around it. You can do a 45-degree angle, but some of it you'll need to be very, very careful with. And then finally, once that step is done, we'll get some White Scar and do the extreme edges, which is, I'll be honest, the vast majority of it. And we want to just do a slimmer highlight on everything else that we can, leaving some of that Corax White in some areas, but just roll around it. This is the big feature on the model, I feel. The weapon's great, but the horns just look bonkers when you actually look at him. They're huge things. So anything you can do to make these look good, do it. So here's the final effect. Very straightforward. What's it? 4 steps. You could spend ages trying to wet blend that. I feel like using the wash kind of achieves it quite quickly. Now we've got our final few bits and bobs, and that is the gems first. Now, we haven't used Lupercal Green anywhere else, so I thought rather than going with like a Stegodon Scale Green or going with Incubi Darkness again, we're just going to go with Lupercal Green and base coat all the gems. Always quite a stressful moment of painting any miniature when you're doing the final few bits. Doesn't matter how much time you've got to correct your mistakes. But once that's dried, I think we just did 1 coat of Lupercal Green. It's quite good at covering. We're just going to pin drop some Nuln Oil onto these. So we don't want to wash them. We almost want to drop a dollop of it onto each one to give a deep effect in the bottom right hand corner. And then we're going to go around with Carroburg Green, the first layer, and just do the edges. Now with these I only paint the top and left side, creating like an upside down L, but it kind of wraps around, and there's also some gem elements that go the opposite direction. They're almost going vertically into the miniature, so you need to also paint those. And then Sybarite Green, we're going to do the same thing, but only a little bit less. So a little bit less of that L and a little bit less of those vertical lines going backwards into the brass holder. It's fiddly and there's a lot of gems, but once you've got into the zone with one, you can follow that process around the model. Just rotate him gently to keep going and doing what you've already done previous. Gauss Blaster Green, again, we're following that upside down L shape, but again, slightly less, slightly thinner lines, and again, just keep moving him around for each one. Gently move him to each gem to your brush rather than moving your brush to him. And then White Scar, this is just a dot right on the edge of the upside down L, and then one right at the bottom where the wash is almost dripped into a nice dark colour. Then the gems will be finished, but we'll add some gloss varnish to that at the end. Right, the eyes, I feel in the heavy metal job, they made them look very red and raging, so we've gone with that principle, but we're going to go turquoise, obviously. So we're starting with Corvus Black. He's just going to have completely black eyes. Not Abaddon Black, so maybe a bit too dark. We're going Corvus Black, and we're just painting the whole eye in this. And I don't know if my camera's specifically quite good enough to show this, but it's difficult. This is a Winsor & Newton brush here. I'm just directing the brush along the eye from the side and just trying to lay it in. It may take a few attempts. And then we're going to get Incubi Darkness and paint the most of the eye. We'll just paint the vast majority, followed by Gauss Blaster Green, where we'll paint a bit more of a central pupil on these two. It's really fiddly. I feel if you're not, confident with eyes, I would just get Sybarite Green or Cabalite Green and just paint that in instead, and then maybe get some wash. That might give you a similar effect, but it's very difficult to let the wash, control the wash in such a small area. But there's always a way around things, and of course you could just paint his eyes normally, and you could just paint his eyes white, whatever you feel. And if you don't want to, don't paint them. Simple as that. Corvus Black next. We're just finishing him off. He's standing on like a tactical rock, as all these models often are. So we're painting that and the base, and then we're going to wash it in Druchii Violet. A lovely colour. It's just a contrast, really, contrasting to add a bit of different colour. But washes like this can take a while to dry. Here's my tactical fan. God, you need it when you're painting these models for film. So yeah, real quick, we're gonna just dry brush Corvus Black back over all of this to start, and then another dry brush of Mechanica Standard Grey, and our little chap other than the little final bits and bobs, is finished. You can of course base them however you desire. We're going to rim the base in Abaddon Black. We're going to add a couple tufts. I mean, it's obviously living in a dark waste, so we want to, add, a little bit of extra colour down there. But what we'll do to finish this model off is we shall varnish him in some Vallejo matte varnish, and we apply that with a brush. I'll show you maybe do a video soon about how that's done. Then we're going to go in and do, once that's dry, the gloss varnish on all of the gems. So that's him finished. A bonkers turquoise tuft, of course. I hope you've enjoyed the video. We really enjoyed painting this guy. I kind of wish he was on a square base, but alas, he is not. So if you loved it, subscribe. If you didn't, thanks for stopping by. And we'll see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.